My name is Genevieve Lawson, and right before my heart transplant, as I lay on the operating table with my life on the line, my only son leaned over and said, "Once this $28 million will is signed, you're just a body." He believed I would never wake up. But minutes later, the doctor walked in with a different document. And what happened when my son saw it changed everything. I never imagined my life would come to this moment, lying in a hospital bed, waiting for a heart transplant, not knowing if I would survive the night. I am 63 years old, a widow, and for most of my life, I believed my greatest accomplishment was not the business empire my husband and I built, but the son we raised together. After my husband passed unexpectedly from a stroke, my son Nathan became the center of my world. I spent years believing that no matter how much success or money we accumulated, family love was the one thing that could never be bought or broken. I was wrong. When my health began to decline, I tried to hide my weakness. I stayed strong in front of Nathan, telling him not to worry. At first, he seemed caring, often visiting me, bringing flowers and talking about my recovery. I felt grateful, believing I had raised a loving and loyal son. But slowly, things began to change. His visits became noticeably focused on financial decisions rather than my health. He asked questions about property titles, insurance policies, and corporate shares. He said things like, "Mom, we should be practical," and "It's time to prepare for the future." I tried to believe he was being responsible, but something in his tone felt cold. His wife, Jenna, always sat next to him in silence during our discussions, giving supportive smiles but avoiding eye contact, as if she already knew the ending to a story I had not yet read. The hospital room became the final test of truth. As I awaited surgery, I watched my son standing at the foot of my bed, scrolling through financial apps while doctors checked my vitals. He didn't ask how I was feeling. Instead, he said, "We need you to sign the final will before anesthesia, so there's no delay in the transfer if anything goes wrong." His voice was steady, almost rehearsed. My heart ached, not only from illness, but from something far worse, realizing that the child I once held in my arms was looking at me as a legal formality instead of his mother. That night, I prayed for strength, not just to survive surgery, but to see the truth clearly. I had always believed love would protect me. Now I was beginning to understand that love without sincerity is only a mask people wear when they want something from you. As I closed my eyes and took what I thought might be my last breath, I made a silent promise. If I survived, I would no longer measure people by their words, but by their hearts. If you're still here, make sure to subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. What happens next will shock you even more. The next morning, as nurses prepared me for surgery, I could feel the weight of the moment sinking deeper into my chest than any medical instrument could reach. I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by the steady beeping of machines and the soft rustling of medical staff, while my son stood at the edge of my room scrolling through his phone, as if he were waiting for a business deal to be finalized, rather than his mother to be taken into an operating room. When the lawyer arrived with the documents in a sealed envelope, Nathan's face lit up with relief, not because I was alive, but because he believed he was about to secure my estate. My daughter-in-law Jenna stayed close to him, whispering instructions under her breath, like she was directing a performance. I heard her say, "Make sure she signs all 3 pages. If anything happens during surgery, the transfer is immediate." The nurse beside me gently touched my arm and asked if I was comfortable. I nodded, though inside I felt nothing close to comfort. My heart was not just failing physically. It was breaking under the truth that the people I loved most were counting down my breaths like numbers on a calculator. Nathan approached me with a pen in hand and said, "Mom, don't worry. This is just to protect your legacy." His tone was soft, but his eyes were cold. I looked at him carefully and asked, "What if I survive?" Without hesitation, he replied, "Then everything will already be in order, and you won't have to worry about anything." The words sounded comforting on the surface, but the meaning beneath them was sharp. He had no expectation and no desire for me to survive. Before I could respond, The heart monitor beeped louder due to the rise in my blood pressure. The nurse calmly adjusted my IV, but I saw the concern in her eyes. She could sense the emotional storm, even if she didn't know the details. Nathan leaned close to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. He said, "Once this is signed, you can rest. You've done your part. After that, you're just a body. I'll handle the rest." His words cut through me deeper than any scalpel could. In that instant, every memory of holding him as a baby, every birthday party, every school event, every sacrifice I made as a mother flashed through my mind, but none of it mattered to him anymore. He was not looking at me as his mother. He was looking at me as a transaction. My breath became faint, but something within me became stronger. I turned my head slowly and looked toward the doorway, and that's when I saw Dr. Aaron Mitchell standing there. His eyes met mine, and for the first time since arriving at the hospital, I felt seen. Nathan noticed the doctor and quickly straightened his posture, pretending to be the caring son. "Doctor, we're just finalizing some paperwork," he said. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward and asked to see the documents. Nathan hesitated, but handed them over, confident that everything was in order. As the doctor flipped through the pages, I watched his expression change. First to concern, then to unmistakable disapproval. He looked at me and asked, "Mrs. Lawson, did you personally authorize this transfer today?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Nathan interrupted, "She's not in a state to talk about finances. We've already made the legal decision as a family." Dr. Mitchell's voice became firm. "Her heart may be weak, but her mind is not. She speaks for herself." The room grew still. Even Jenna took a step back. I could feel my strength returning, not in my body, but in my spirit. This was the moment I knew I had one final chance to choose truth over fear. With all the courage I had left, I took a breath and said, "Doctor, I have not agreed to anything today, and I have more to say before this surgery begins." In that single moment, the energy in the room shifted. Nathan's plan was no longer hidden. He stepped back, his face tightening as he realized everything was slipping out of his control. What he didn't know, but was about to learn, was that this story was not going to end with my silence. It was going to end with the truth. Dr. Mitchell calmly placed the documents on the tray beside my hospital bed and looked directly at Nathan with a steady gaze that stripped away every polite mask in the room. The air felt heavy, not with fear, but with truth that could no longer be hidden. He said, "Before any legal documents are signed in a medical setting, I am required to confirm the patient is acting of their own free will." Nathan forced a smile and replied, "Of course she is. My mother knows what's best. We discussed all of this weeks ago, but Dr. Mitchell did not take his eyes off me. He stepped closer and asked softly, "Mrs. Lawson, do you wish to transfer your estate at this moment?" My heart pounded, not because of the surgery ahead, but because I finally understood that this was my chance. Not to fight my son with anger, but to protect myself with clarity. I looked at him and said, "I want to review my options privately, without pressure." The room fell silent. Nathan's expression shifted from irritation to panic as he realized the control he thought he had was slipping away. He stepped forward, his voice raised. "Mom, this is unnecessary. Everything is already arranged. Just sign it so we can focus on your surgery." His words were not concern. They were commands. And hearing them in front of witnesses revealed everything. Dr. Mitchell straightened his posture and spoke directly to Nathan with a firm tone. "Your mother is still under full mental capacity, and you are not her legal guardian. She has every right to delay or refuse any signature." Jenna stepped forward, her face tightening as she tried to recover the situation. "Doctor, you don't understand. This is a family matter." Dr. Mitchell turned to her and said, "When a patient is under medical duress, any attempt to influence legal decisions becomes a matter of medical ethics, not family preference." With that, he pressed a button on the wall. Two additional medical administrators entered the room, carrying a sealed envelope. My breath caught in my chest because I recognized the handwriting on the outside, my own, written weeks earlier when I had quietly requested emergency legal protections in the event of coercion. At the time, it had been a precaution, something I never believed I would truly need. But as I watched the administrator open the envelope and hand the document to Dr. Mitchell, I felt a quiet strength rise in me. It was as if my late husband was there, guiding the moment. Dr. Mitchell read aloud, "By order of the Lawson Protective Estate Clause, executed voluntarily by Genevieve Lawson and notarized, the estate is no longer to be transferred to a single heir, but placed into a medical trust that only activates upon the successful recovery of the grantor. In the event of any suspected coercion, the trust will immediately recognize alternate beneficiaries appointed in advance." Nathan's eyes widened, and Jenna's hand flew to her mouth. Dr. Mitchell continued, "The alternate beneficiary named in this document, in the event of breach of trust by the primary heir, is—" At that moment, Nathan lunged forward and tried to snatch the document from Dr. Mitchell's hand. Security was called instantly. The medical staff, already aware of the sensitive situation, stepped between him and me. Nathan's voice cracked with desperation as he shouted, "Mom, what did you do? You can't take this away from me." I looked at him, feeling decades of motherhood pulsing through my heart, years of sacrifice, love, hope, and now heartbreak. I had wanted my son to be my legacy, but now I saw that my legacy was not meant to be tied to someone who only valued my life as long as it served his agenda. Dr. Mitchell then spoke the words that would change the direction of everything. "The named heir, in the event of misconduct, is not Nathan Lawson." A silence fell so deep that even the machines seemed to pause. Nathan stood frozen. Jenna's face lost all expression. The administrators held the second page of the document, ready to reveal the name that would alter the fate of my family. In that moment, I realized the truth. I had already made my decision long before this day, not out of revenge, but out of love, for myself, for the truth, and for the legacy that my husband and I built with honest hands. And now, that truth was about to be spoken out loud, and no one in the room was prepared for what would come next. Nathan stood frozen as Dr. Mitchell held the final page of the document, his eyes slowly scanning its contents before lifting his gaze to the room. The heart monitor beside me beeped steadily, the rhythm of my life marking each second that my son's confidence unraveled. Nurses paused their preparations. Jenna clutched Nathan's arm tightly, her breathing quickening as she whispered, "It's a bluff, Nathan. Your mother would never." But before she could finish, Dr. Mitchell read aloud, "In the event that the primary heir demonstrates intent to exploit, neglect, or coerce the grantor at any point before or during medical treatment, the estate will be immediately and permanently reassigned to the alternate heir named in this clause, Holly Reyes." The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt as if the world itself had stopped breathing. Nathan blinked slowly, his mind refusing to process what he had just heard. Jenna let out a soft gasp, then laughed nervously. "The caretaker? This is ridiculous." But Dr. Mitchell continued, "This designation was made in accordance with the Ethical Assistance Clause established by Mr. Lawson before his death, ensuring that the estate would go to the person who demonstrated care, loyalty, and genuine love without expectation of financial gain." Nathan's face turned bright red. His voice cracked with rage as he yelled, "This is a lie! Mom, tell him this is a mistake!" I looked at him with the calm strength of a woman who had finally seen the full truth. "Nathan," I said quietly, "I gave you my love. I trusted you with my heart, literally and legally. But you only saw me as a number. Holly saw me as a person." Nathan's anger rapidly transformed into panic. He lunged forward toward the document, but two medical security officers stepped between us, holding him back. Jenna stepped away from him, her face twisting with fear that everything she had built her identity around was slipping away. "This can't be legal," she cried. "She signed the will yesterday." Dr. Mitchell replied with firm authority, "That will was superseded by this trust, legally notarized and filed prior to any signing attempted today. Under the law, your actions not only voided your claim, but placed you under investigation for attempted inheritance manipulation." At that, Nathan collapsed into a chair. His breathing grew shallow as the realization washed over him. Not only had he lost everything, but Holly, the very person he had dismissed as insignificant, had been chosen over him by his own mother. Holly stood quietly in the corner of the room, tears in her eyes, shocked and overwhelmed. She looked at me, not with greed, but with trembling gratitude and disbelief. She whispered, "I never wanted anything from you except to see you live." And that was the moment Nathan broke. Nathan's shoulders shook as he buried his face in his hands. "You're choosing a stranger over me," he said, voice raw and trembling. I looked at him and answered with honesty that carried the weight of every broken expectation. "I did not choose a stranger over you. I chose love over selfishness. I chose loyalty over blood that forgot its own heartbeat." The legal officers stepped forward and placed a formal notice in Nathan's lap, informing him that he was now legally barred from making any medical or financial decisions regarding my life. Jenna silently began backing toward the door, her mind clearly racing toward self-preservation. Dr. Mitchell then instructed the team to proceed with surgery, but before they wheeled me away, he asked if I wanted to speak my final words to the room. I nodded and looked directly at Nathan. "What you failed to understand is that you were never entitled to my legacy. You were invited to be part of it. You could have inherited not just wealth, but honor. But you chose greed, and greed is not a legacy. It is a disease." As they began rolling my bed toward the operating theater, Nathan suddenly fell to his knees beside the gurney, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean it. I was scared. I thought if I didn't secure the money, I'd lose everything." I placed my weak hand over his and said, "You lost everything the moment you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as an asset. But listen to me carefully. This is not your punishment. This is your chance to change." As I was wheeled through the surgical doors, the last thing I saw was my son, once powerful, now humbled, crying in the middle of the hospital hallway, not because he lost $28 million, but because he finally realized he had lost the one thing that money could never buy back, the trust of his mother. When I opened my eyes after the surgery, the first thing I saw was the soft glow of morning sunlight pushing gently through the hospital blinds, as if the world itself were whispering that a new chapter had begun. I heard steady beeps from my heart monitor, not the frantic rhythm of fear, but the strong, calm rhythm of life restored. Holly sat beside my bed, her hands clasped in quiet prayer. When she realized I was awake, she stood and gently wiped her tears, whispering, "You made it. Your heart is strong." In that moment, I understood that surviving the transplant was not the miracle I had been given. It was the chance to live the rest of my life with clarity. Nathan was nowhere in sight. I later learned that he had been escorted out of the hospital the night before after a complete emotional breakdown. He had attempted to access my medical records, insisting that I was not capable of making decisions. Instead of gaining control, he was placed under investigation for medical coercion and manipulation. The estate, the businesses, the assets, everything he once claimed as his birthright, was now protected under a trust that he could not touch. And for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt about it. Because love is not proven by keeping someone close at the cost of your own survival. Love is proven when you refuse to allow someone, even your own child, to destroy themselves through greed. Over the next few days, I watched my life transform. Holly remained by my side, not to discuss finances, but to make sure I was warm, hydrated, and emotionally at peace. She brought me letters from staff members at the foundation, many of whom had written personal notes saying they were thankful for the trust that would now expand our mission to help others in need, especially elderly patients who had no family to advocate for them. The truth slowly settled into my heart. This was always meant to be my legacy, not buildings or account balances, but lives changed through compassion. On the fourth day, Dr. Mitchell came to visit. He stood beside my bed and said, "Genevieve, I want you to know something. What happened in that room was not just legal justice. It was a spiritual awakening. Your son may have lost material wealth, but he has now been given the opportunity to find his character. Whether he changes is no longer your burden to carry." His words lifted a weight I didn't even realize I had been holding. I closed my eyes and let the truth wash over me. Not all endings are punishments. Some are beginnings disguised as consequences. It wasn't until a week later that Nathan finally returned, this time without Jenna, without arrogance, and without the posture of entitlement. He walked slowly into my hospital room, his face pale and eyes swollen from sleepless nights. He stood at the foot of my bed, unable to speak at first. When he finally found his voice, it trembled with humility I had never seen in him. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know I lost everything, but the truth is, I lost you long before that. I saw you as an obstacle, not as my mother. I don't blame you for what happened. I blame myself." Tears filled my eyes, not out of sorrow, but because this was the first time in years that my son was speaking from his heart instead of his ego. I extended my hand to him and said, "Nathan, as long as there is breath in your lungs, you have a chance to rebuild who you are. Wealth can be regained, status can be bought, but character must be earned." Nathan dropped to his knees and wept, not for money, but for understanding. Weeks later, I was strong enough to return home. I did not return to a mansion filled with silent greed. I returned to a sanctuary of healing, where every room would now serve a purpose, to bring relief, dignity, and hope to people facing the same vulnerability I once did. My husband's legacy was no longer something that could be inherited like an object. It was alive in every person we would help. Standing in the garden with Holly by my side, I felt the wind move through the trees, and I knew my life had not been saved just so I could live longer. It had been saved so I could live right. The son I once feared had finally seen the truth. The heart that once struggled to beat now beat with purpose. The legacy that once seemed tied to wealth was now tied to meaning. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, subscribe right now and comment where in the world you're watching from. Your voice matters, and your story could be the next one that inspires millions.